Cohen, head of the retail studies at the Columbia Business School, joining us. It's a very tough time for retailers. He's been actually interviewed in almost all news outlets in the US. Most recently in the New York Times, where 2 days ago they picked up on a quote of yours to put a title in the story, which was very few are likely to survive, referring to department stores. So there's a lot to talk about. I will introduce George de Bourguignon. He will be conducting the conversation with Mark. George is a former student, alumnus of both the Columbia Business School and the Columbia School of International Affairs. He's the president of the Columbia Alumni Club of Chile and member of the advisory board. So George, you have the screen. Thanks again, Mark, for taking the time to speak to us in Chile.
Okay, thank you, Karen, and thank you, Professor Cohen, and everyone who has joined this conversation virtually. We're excited to have this conversation with you, Professor, about the situation of the retail industry and what should we expect of it in the future, considering this new normal situation. I want to start asking you a few questions about the current situation. I have seen that you've been able, as Karen was mentioning, to express some views on different news outlets. So I think it's a good point to start over there, and from there we can move on the conversation to more specific topics. So in particular, I want to refer to something that you have already mentioned in the news, is that we have seen that clothing and apparel retail sales have had a significant decline during the last month and a half, roughly 50% of their sales, which is quite unprecedented in the industry. I guess my question would be, what are the repercussions that you see of this coronavirus and the whole situation for the industry? And which segments of it should we expect to have the strongest negative effects? Who are the biggest losers of this whole situation?
Well, you cited apparel and accessory sales being off 50%. In fact, they were off that much in March, and that only reflects the second half of the month, which is about when most stores were closed in the United States. And so I would expect that April will be a full measure of the crisis that is occurring, and the negative numbers are going to be staggering, because no one is selling anything in a brick and mortar store that's not essential. Yeah, the internet is still open, but I don't think people are buying sweaters or handbags from anyone. Certainly Amazon, which sells an extraordinary breadth of products, is principally focused on selling essentials, food and home supplies. The only brick and mortar retailers who are open for business are the Walmarts, Targets, and Costco's. They're able to be open because they sell essential products. They are not selling apparel and accessories, even though their stores make those available. So the consumer has been shut off from conventional retail and is choosing not to engage. The big losers are apparel, accessories, footwear, cosmetics, products that customers would typically shop for under normal circumstances. And of course, the enormous crisis we face, in addition to the health crisis, which is foremost in everyone's mind, is that no one can accurately predict when stores will be able to reopen, when customers will be able to venture out of their homes, come back to work. And then, of course, there's tremendous uncertainty about what customers will actually do once they're permitted or able to shop. So everyone is desperately seeking normalcy, but what we're facing is some form of new normalcy And it's very difficult to understand what that's going to be like.
Mm. That's very interesting. And do you think that if things take an extended period of time before actually stabilizing, what are the effects that you see happening for the retail industry? Should we think of consolidation as an inevitable move in the industry in order to survive?
Well, this is an end-to-end economic crisis, which is principally focused on retail, but not just retail. So there are virtually no retail enterprises that are built for any extended period of closure. Balance sheets typically hold the minimum amount of cash necessary to manage the business on a month-to-month basis. And retailers who don't have enormous excess free cash flow have revolvers, credit instruments, which enable them to bridge the gap between building their inventories in the early fall and then selling it at holiday. All of that process is gone right now. So retailers who are closed are desperately trying to conserve cash. So they've pretty much across the board furloughed or laid off their entire workforce. They have drawn down on their revolvers for fear that if the crisis continues, their revolvers will not be available to them. Some are actually seeking to issue new debt. People like American Eagle and the Gap have announced that. Macy's is trying to seek new financial capacity by way of additional debt because they're not paying their employees. They've laid them off. They're not paying their rent. They're not paying for merchandise that's either arrived or inbound that they will have to take physical possession of. But when the crisis is passing, they will have to reopen their doors. They'll have to pay the rent or some proportion of rent. They'll have to hire their people back. They'll have to pay for the merchandise. And so there will be this enormous liquidity crisis when, in my view, thousands and thousands of retailers will be unable to remain solvent once the crisis begins to pass. And so I think we're going to see just an incredible landslide of bankruptcy filings and other forms of distress that emerge. And it's impossible to really gauge the full measure because, once again, no one really knows what the end date or the opening date will be, whether it's May 1st, which I think is a bit of a pipe dream in the US, or it's July, August, or September. No one really knows.
This is definitely an alarming landscape that you are painting to us. I guess to try to find any comfort, who do you think are those that are in a better position today in order to navigate this crisis? What are the characteristics that those that can emerge as winners? What are those characteristics, and who could potentially be that winner or those winners?
Well, the retail businesses that were doing well, consistently well, up to the onset of the pandemic are highly likely to be able to recover. They're likely to have enough cash capacity and be able to open up new cash capacity because their relationship with customers were healthy, their relationships were healthy, and their balance sheets were clean. And so they're especially enhanced if they are in that category of retailer, like supermarkets, chains like Kroger, or general merchandise retailers like Costco, Amazon, Target, and Walmart, because they're actually open and doing an enormous amount of business. Now, their margins are suffering because they're selling a lot more food product at very, very small margins relative to other products they would normally sell. But their relationship with customers was strong before the pandemic. It's stronger now that they're servicing their customers, and they will emerge as winners. Unfortunately, everyone else in the traditional landscape of retail, specifically the department stores, are in a world of hurt because their business has been in decline for years, slow, steady decline, and they don't have a franchise with any surety that suggests that when their doors reopen, their customers are going to come back as they once did before the crisis. So it's a winner-loser outlook with a few winners, lots of losers. Now, I would also say that Amazon, which lots of people are fans of, I happen to be and have been since they started doing business, lots of people are critics. Amazon should be given credit not only for doing the business they're doing, servicing millions of customers all around the world, but for having dragged the entire retail industry into the e-commerce space. Because without an Amazon, I doubt a Walmart or a Target or even a Costco would be as capable as they are today to be able to service customers online.
So, and this is interesting because you talk about the relevance of a client relationship being healthy in order to navigate successfully this industry. What are the elements that provide that healthiness of the relationship? Is it being omni-channel? Is it being online? What is it? Or is it having, I don't know, what are the characteristics that provide for a good client relationship?
Well, I think that that technology has taken hold universally everywhere in the world. I remember 25 years ago being in a boardroom with some titans of industry, listening to one of those highly regarded CEOs suggest forcefully that this Amazon phenomenon was a fad. It would never take hold. No one would ever want to buy anything more than a book or a DVD on the internet. After all, who would give an upstart like Amazon or anyone else the use of their credit card? I was a senior executive, so I wasn't at risk when I raised my hand and I said, excuse me, every time you go into a restaurant, you give someone the use of your credit card. And I was, tut-tutted as, you're just being a little aggressive with me. Well, at the end of the day, the internet is a portal for billions of customers everywhere around the world to acquire anything and everything they wish. And the retailers who have created that capacity, especially from a point of view of transparency, shop in store, shop online, pick up in store, return in store or online, have moved into this enormously powerful preference. Now, people point out that Amazon doesn't have much brick and mortar yet. I think that's going to change. But then Amazon has an SKU offering that approaches 1 billion items. It may even be more than that today. And so the marketplace has shifted from the store, either downtown or in a mall, to an entirely different opportunity. And so the retailers who are increasingly able to make a customer's experience seamless, offer customers what they want at prices that they are comfortable paying in a manner in which they feel very, very fulfilled when they transact. And this is the way the world has been moving steadily up to the pandemic. And I think the pandemic is just going to accelerate this behavior in a very big way when this is over.
I was actually going to ask you about that. Do you see customers' habits changing or disposition towards e-commerce even further after the sanitary crisis that we're living?
Well, I think that existing e-commerce customers, at least from my vantage point in the United States and certainly in New York, and I live in a large apartment building, and I do a very unscientific survey every day as I walk through the package entrance of the building, and and gauge the mountain of packages that arrive every day. A few years ago, there were a handful. Today, they've got a crisis. They don't have enough corridor space to stack this up. And so the mountain has been growing. I would suggest that existing e-commerce customers have been shopping via online with abandon. So they're buying a whole lot more than what they normally would online. And there's probably millions of customers around the world who have not yet taken advantage of online shopping, or if they have, they've only done it in a very limited way, who are seeking it out in a very big way. So the market share of online players is growing out of the crisis. And my guess is that they will hold on to a lot of that share, if not all of it, when the crisis passes. Because customers, though they will want to shop, touch and feel and try on merchandise at some point, they're clearly opting for this alternative marketplace as a preference.
And how does that contrast with the idea of Amazon that you were mentioning, that Amazon might be increasing their brick and mortar presence in the future? Because there's a say that the brick and mortar rent is sort of like the new customer acquisition cost, that you need to have this brick and mortar so that you can attract customers either as a showroom or something like that. So how these two dynamics that seem to be in opposite directions talk with each other?
Well, Amazon, as everyone probably will agree, is a unique enterprise in and of itself. I believe that at least in the United States, or first in the United States, Amazon is going to open up thousands of this Go convenience store. I really do believe that. And I think the model that they will adopt will harken back to the old days of the Sears Roebuck Montgomery Ward catalog business, when literally millions of customers picked up their orders from a local retailer, a grocery store, a barber shop, a post office, because they didn't have in-home delivery, or because they weren't comfortable having a package left on their doorstep. And so today, that still remains the case. If you're living in New York City and you would love to do business with Amazon, but you don't live in a building with a package desk or a security desk, you may be very insecure about having something left on your doorstep, or having to, continuously reset your delivery because you're not home. In addition, there are millions of customers who are essentially frozen out of e-commerce because they can't use a credit card. They either don't have a credit card, or they don't want to have a credit card, or they can't get one, or they don't want to use one. And today, the only way to do business, pretty much, at least in the US, is through the use of a credit card. And back in the day, I'm old, I go way back, and when I was in Canada, we had a catalog business of consequence. People paid cash for their orders when they picked their orders up. It was cash on delivery, COD. And so even though people are dismissive of the cash economy and think that cash is going to disappear as a currency, there are still millions and millions of customers who not only prefer it, but must use cash. And I would say Walmart probably does an astonishing amount of their business, even in today's day and age, in cash. And that's probably a phenomenon that's apparent around the world, maybe less so in China, which is ahead of the curve in terms of technology transaction practices. But so I think Amazon is going to expand its footprint from a convenience and access point of view. I really don't envision them, although I could be very wrong, creating showrooms, since after all, how would they convey the enormous array of products that they have to offer in any kind of a physical space?
So and people, I'm actually reading at questions that people are already sending to us. So thank you for those who have been sending them. We were talking about the payment technologies and China being a little bit more advanced. Electronic wallets, is that a solution for people who are frozen out of e-commerce, given they don't have credit cards?
Well, an electronic wallet only works if there's some kind of a banking relationship that backstops its use. And there are quite a few customers who either don't have a banking relationship. We're discovering there's a very large number who aren't getting these stimulus checks from the U.S. government because they don't have a relationship with the U.S. government, or they don't have a relationship with a bank, and so they can't get a direct deposit benefit. They have to wait for something to be mailed to them. So I think that there's going to be an increased amount of usage surrounding electronic transactions, whether it's electronic wallet or the use of a smartphone, which is a form of electronic wallet. It's certainly a more efficient way for retailers to process transactions. Cash is very expensive and troublesome to deal with. But I think we're not yet at a point where we eliminate the use of actual traditional currency. And so the right answer for a retailer is to make it tremendously convenient for their customers to shop however they choose to shop, as opposed to being somewhat exclusive in their view. I would point out that there are a growing number of food chains in the United States that have started to accept only credit cards or only electronic wallet payment. And local municipalities, for example, the city of Philadelphia, have outlawed that practice because they believe it's prejudicial to lower income customers who don't have the ability to shop. So I think we're going to see technology want to lean forward, government wanting to slow technology down. And at the end of the day, a really successful retailer is not going to get in the way of their customer wanting to do business with them.
Does this mean that in the future we can still expect for department stores and shopping malls to have a share of the market? They should not completely disappear?
Well, I must say, forgive me for using the United States and maybe Canada as a principal reference, but those are my reference points. Although I believe that Chile is not fundamentally unlike the US. In the US, there are about 1,400 shopping malls. I would point out that in the 1950s and the 1960s, and even into the early 1970s, the Great American Shopping Mall emerged when pre-World War II, it didn't exist. It was fueled by the creation of the interstate highway system in the United States, which created an opportunity for this enormous migration of young people who lived in urban centers, who were returning from World War II to form families and move into suburbs, newly formed suburbs. As those suburbs became established, the Great American Shopping Mall appeared in close proximity. So the freeway was built, the suburb tracked alongside of it. At the bottom of exit ramp number 2 came a shopping center, and it serviced customers who otherwise would have had to gone back into the city to shop. It was fueled by department stores who acted as anchors, and the emergence of this enormous specialty store phenomenon that filled up those malls. So in any community, the first mall was a brilliant success. Success brings competition. On the other side of the freeway, someone built a second mall that was successful, then a third mall, then a fourth mall, to the point at which in the US, there were something like 10, 15, even 20 times the square footage per capita than anywhere else in the world, certainly than Western Europe or anywhere in South America. And so the shopping mall, over the course of 3 decades or so, wiped out downtown retailing in hundreds of US cities. And now the internet over the last 10 to 15 years has been doing just that to the shopping mall. Now, of the 1,400, there are about 250 that are referred to here as AAA or super regionals. These are the very large malls with 4 or 5, in some cases 6 anchors, whose size is only limited by the communities that surround them that won't let them continue to grow, whose capacity is limited by traffic congestion at holiday. They are doing business. Their business is softened a bit because of the internet, but they're healthy going into the pandemic. They are fully tenanted, and when a Sears or a Penny's or even a Macy's closes, they eagerly redevelop the space. 250 are going to be healthy, as I see it, well into the future, because people are going to want to shop physically. But the other 1,100 are in various forms of distress. They're in some cases being referred to as zombie malls, or as you put it in your note to me, ghost malls. They're still open. They've got lots of vacancies. They feel increasingly like an empty restaurant. They don't look as neat and clean and safe as they did in their storied past. Customers are beginning to avoid them because they're not an attractive place to shop as they once were. And these malls, hundreds of these, are going, in my opinion, going to fail quickly as a result of this pandemic. They're not getting, their tenants aren't paying rent. They aren't paying their mortgages. Many of their tenants will no longer be able to pay rent once the malls reopen because they will be insolvent. And customers who have been shunning these locations slowly are likely to abandon them at a more rapid pace. And so this upheaval is going to be a tremendous upheaval in the marketplaces, as well as the people who participate in the marketplace, the retailers. The chaos and confusion is going to cascade back to brands who are struggling with inventory that they're not being able to sell. It's going to cascade back into the manufacturing community worldwide, where merchandise isn't being paid for, merchandise is not being committed to, and it's anybody's guess when the global system will open back up. Now, I know I'm painting a very grim picture, so please forgive me. There is some very good news. I mean, if you can view it as good news. So please take what I'm saying in the right vein. I don't mean to make light of what we're dealing with. The very good news is that COVID-19 is not killing everybody, as pandemics hundreds of years ago did. As, by the way, a new pandemic could very likely or could possibly do in the future. It's not as tragic as the polio crisis was decades ago. It's certainly not as deadly as the pandemic of 1918. So a lot of people are getting sick. A few people are dying, and I don't say a few, meaning that that's meaningless. But most human beings will either not get this, be asymptomatic, or recover from it. And most human beings will want to come out of their homes, will want to go back to their jobs, will eventually regain employment, though that could take a fair amount of time, and will want to shop and will want to acquire more than just the kind of survival-like needs that they have today, food and supplies, and they will migrate quickly back into the fashion businesses that we've all seen with wonderment. They will buy new things to wear. They'll buy new technology devices. So I think we're going to see a reoccurrence of a worldwide ebullient economy, but it could take quite a while for that to make itself known.
Mm-hmm. And I think in that recovery, it's certainly those retailers that are not left that don't disappear in the crisis. So the survivors will have a tremendous opportunity because they will have less competition, if one may think of. For those who survive, who come from the more traditional brick and mortar, and this is someone's question, what's the path towards digitalization and the path that they need to take in order to take advantage of the opportunity once the crisis has passed? What is it that they need to do?
Well, e-commerce is now a price of entry, and unfortunately, most legacy retailers who've gone into the e-commerce space have really not made it a special experience for their customers. They're just putting merchandise up online, typically on sale, in a very unappealing way. Now, you could say Amazon is not particularly fashionable in the way they present merchandise, but Amazon presents literally a billion choices, and Amazon presents it in the context of an extraordinarily efficient search and transition architecture. Most legacy retailers are paying lip service to their e-commerce business. So the customer is seeing something that's not as efficient, effective, or appealing as it really has to be. And I would suspect, as we look toward the future, a legacy retailer has to pay a lot more attention to how their stores look. You know, neat, clean, and friendly is a price of entry. There are thousands of retailers in the United States who aren't neat, clean, or friendly. And now they're getting savaged for the fact that they're not a driveway destination as they once were. This is why so many of those malls are failing. So the interplay between an online presence and a physical presence has to be beautifully architected so it's seamless to a customer, and it's attractive, and it's appealing, and it's flexible. On the inside of the new normal, most legacy retailers who are proud to tell you how much business they're doing online are losing a tremendous amount of money because they haven't created the architecture in which they're going to have to be able to sell goods online profitably. Now, people say, well, you know, Amazon doesn't make any money. Well, that's a misnomer. And I'll speak to that in a sec. I'll speak to that. Amazon happens to have created, as a parallel business, something called, as you all know, Amazon Web Services. And when I worked with Amazon as a potential partner when I was at Sears Canada, they were investing hundreds of millions of dollars a year in creating that technology platform, which is now known as Amazon Web Services. And it is literally a printing press. It produces billions of dollars of profit and free cash flow. And so they have the capacity to service this ever-expanding marketplace that they've literally created. And I would also point out that if Amazon raised their prices across a billion SKUs by a handful of cents, 5 cents, something which customers would never notice, they could show enormous profitability from their retail business. At the end of the day, though, for a retailer to survive, they have to have stores that are extremely well located, well assorted, well presented, staffing that meets the customer's expectations, with an internet companion that is hand in glove, viewed by the customer as one and the same. This is especially important in light of the fact that augmented reality, virtual reality, has been upon us. It hasn't been widely practiced, but it will be. And so customers will want to shop physically in a store, and they'll want to shop virtually in a store, rather than just page through a series of web pages with literally 15 to 16 postage stamp size vignettes, one after the other. So the experience has to become much more appealing than it is today.
And considering the need for that experience to be appealing, as you say, the online experience, I think I refer to, should these retailers that survive, should they attempt to go online on their own or through marketplaces as Amazon? What would you say it's a better strategy for them?
Well, I think a brand that has significant brand equity would be well advised to try to have a relationship with their customers that's direct. And so in creating that D2C relationship, they retain enormous control. They don't share the limelight with anybody else's brand or any other business. They have control over presentation, pricing, timing, and customer service. That's easy to talk about, not easy to deliver. You have to be very successful to be able to devote an organization to creating that kind of capacity. Absent that, the right answer for many brands is to use a D2C marketplace like an Amazon. Now, there are a lot of brands that over the past 10 or 15 years have said, well, we don't want to do business with Amazon. Amazon's beneath us. Amazon's déclassé. Amazon's not classy enough for us. Amazon is not the right place for us to show our merchandise. Well, that flies in the face of millions and millions and millions of Amazon customers who really want to be able to buy things through Amazon because they trust Amazon. And so even the luxury houses, who, as you probably all know, were for many years unwilling to even invest in their own websites, are now putting a lot more energy into their websites. And they're actually, I think we're going to see them actually allow customers to buy things from their websites, to see what availability is of product in their stores and actually to be able to see the prices of things. Even the luxury sector is going to be confronted by a need to step up their game. And in the absence of being able to do that, to find a transactional partner. And I would say one other thing, Amazon pays its bills. So there's an enormous number of brands doing business today through Amazon, where Amazon's business is keeping them alive.
Mm. Yeah, but is that particular to the US and Canada, or can we think of Amazon as a good partner for international e-commerce? Because Amazon has had mixed performance outside of North America, particularly in China, for example.
Well, I say Amazon, but I don't mean to say Amazon is the only transactional player in the world. Amazon had an initial foray into China and decided that wasn't going to be a place for them to grow in the face of a competitor called Alibaba or even Tencent. So Amazon pivoted and has now made a longer term investment in India, for example. Amazon has done far better than most retailers around the world who've crossed the national border, but their track record is not perfect. And in some marketplaces, an Amazon-like organization will emerge who will represent what Amazon does to Americans in their country. I would also point out that Costco, which is not only one of the largest retailers in the world, one of the most productive and profitable, has been remarkably successful internationally. I don't know that there's a country where they have failed as Walmart has failed repeatedly. And they're just now starting to express themselves via the internet here in the United States. Some people would say they're way behind the curve, but I think this is just part of their strategy. They just opened up a store in Shanghai, which you may have all read, had a crisis because they had so many subscribers that on the opening day, the police shut the store down. They wouldn't let anybody approach the store because of the gems that were created. I think they had something like 200,000 people who tried to shop. And that's one store in Shanghai. Of course, they started doing business through others like Alibaba some 6 or 7 years earlier to be able to learn the marketplace. So in Chile, Amazon may never become what it is in a place like the US or Canada, but that will give a Chilean direct-to-consumer enterprise a tremendous opportunity because Chileans are going to want to shop on the internet just like their North American counterparts. And I think that's a phenomenon that's happening everywhere in the world and will continue to happen.
Yeah, actually, Mercado Libre seems to be the platform most similar to Amazon, who has managed to have a strong presence across Latin America, which is interesting. It's apparently making it more difficult to Amazon to penetrate the Latin American market.
Good for them. Good for them. The degree to which they are delighting their customer is the degree to which they're likely to continue to be successful and continue to grow.
How about food service, the commerce in the street, outside of maybe they could be in the inside department, inside malls, but also the on the streets. What do you think it's going to be the impact for them, which has a totally different dynamics? It's more difficult to make it online unless it's frozen or delivery, but the experience it's completely different.
Well, it's an interesting question. In the US, there were a whole host of online grocers who emerged and quickly failed because Webvan comes to mind. So everybody on Wall Street got all excited about this. And then, of course, it became apparent that some of these businesses could never make any money. They would always be a tremendous financial drain on their investors. The food business worldwide is a very challenging business because the margins on food, particularly fresh food, are de minimis. They're single digit. And the logistics costs, however you sell food to your customer, are challenging, especially perishable food. The farm to table logistics trail is enormously challenging, and it always will be. So when Amazon bought Whole Food, and many of the American food retailers freaked out, like Walmart and Kroger, terribly fearful that Amazon was going to trample them. They all started to invest in their online food business. And they were in the aggregate doing something like 6 or 7% of total grocery sales after several years of chasing Amazon, chasing each other. This crisis has caused an enormous step up in online food, at least here in the United States, an enormous step up, because it's at a point where, whereas a month ago, you could buy things from Amazon Direct, fresh or Amazon Direct, and you could reliably get delivery 2 hours later in Manhattan, in New York City, or certainly next day. Now, when you place an order for groceries, you, in some cases, can't get a delivery date for several weeks because they're completely overwhelmed with demand. And of course, they're having trouble getting the supply chains to readjust delivery to them. There's an enormous amount of suppliers who have been built to supply the restaurant business, the hotel business, the institution business. All of those food purveyors are closed. Now, all of those suppliers need to find a way to deliver to Walmart, Target, Amazon, Costco, Kroger. And so there's this enormous challenge. And of course, the consumer is still hoarding, which is a practice that can never be fully accommodated. So I think the food retailing business, the food business via e-commerce, is going to get an enormous jumpstart as a result of this pandemic. And once things become normal, we can only hope that normal does arrive, people who've never considered buying food online will find it to be extraordinarily convenient, and will continue to shop in supermarkets and on the street, but less so. Now, there's an issue here, and I'm sure it's a worldwide issue, of safety. If you go to a supermarket here that's open, that's struggling to keep its shelves stocked, you see these plexiglass barriers that have been put up between the clerks and the customer. And you've seen markings on the floor so that the queues all enforce a 6-foot distance between customers. It's a very, I would say, uncomfortable experience. As you look around, I was shopping last night in our local supermarket, which is a typical supermarket. Everybody's wearing a mask. Everybody's looking for what they're trying to find on the shelf, and everybody's looking at everyone else as if, are you the one who's going to give me the virus? It's a very edgy, uncomfortable experience. And then of course there's the clerks who are working because they need to remain employed, who are dealing with an unending procession of customers wearing masks. And I can only imagine what's going on in their heads. And so it will take a while for once this pandemic has concluded, hopefully there is a conclusion, for everybody to calm down and for the dials to be reset in terms of customer behavior.
This is well, as a customer of online grocery, I can personally relate to the frustration of having to wait more than 3 or 4 days before I get my spot on the line to get the groceries to my place. It's completely collapsed. I want to stay on the topic of online grocery, because here in Chile we actually have an online platform that has been quite popular. It's called Corner Shop, which is similar to Instacart in the US. And actually Corner Shop is now being acquired by Uber. There has been speculation that they would open a dark grocery store to serve users with their own inventory instead of going into other supermarkets. Is it possible, do you think, to run a successful grocery operation without physical footprint? Do you believe in this concept of dark grocery store?
Well, I think it's intellectually engaging. The question, of course, is twofold. Will customers want to shop that way? And will the enterprise that creates that capability be able to make any money? You know, there are people who have speculated that Uber will never be profitable, as it's now known. Think of the WeWork phenomenon that emerged, that was on thin ice before the pandemic and now is probably never going to recover or not likely to recover. So these alternative pathways, these direct delivery operations are certainly of appeal to customers, but can anyone make sense of it? So Instacart here and others like them here are certainly in enormous demand right now, but you know, is there enough gross margin in the product to pay for this kind of element of conveyance? People have fantasized about that ubiquitous drone delivery. You know, you get a notice on your phone that your drone is approaching, and you go outdoors and raise your hands out, and the drone lowers your order into your arms or drops it at your feet. I think maybe at the end of this century we're going to see that, but certainly not anytime soon. So I think that there's a lot of wishing and hoping. A lot will wait for someone to prove the concept as economically viable.
So in a way, maybe because I've also had the possibility of analyzing to invest in the last mile industry, and it's always been a puzzle for me, the idea of it actually becoming profitable at some point, because it's a competition of who can make it faster and then who can make it cheaper, but there's a limit. And so I guess do you think, are we lucky enough to be the generation that is being subsidized by cheap money, and that's why we have all these last mile online delivery services, or can we see this as a sustainable trend happening, that's where companies eventually become profitable?
Well, cheap money may be a thing of the past when this crisis is over, but at the end of the day, we all know that free delivery is not free. Mm-hmm. Nothing in this life is free. I think that as we look toward the pandemic passing and the next round of economic activity, customers may still demand free delivery, but pricing is going to have to be adjusted to accommodate it, because in fact, enterprises cannot go on indefinitely on a lose money basis, on a loss basis. It's not reasonable. It's not sustainable. It's interesting what Amazon has done, and I think others are going to be doing this increasingly. They're cutting out the intermediary. They're increasingly delivering products to customers using their own delivery organization, which they've just started to build out in the United States. And they've done it in an interesting way, because because they've clearly been in hand-to-hand combat for years with UPS and FedEx and DHL over shipping rates. They've become their largest customer, and so they have tremendous leverage. I think you all must have read that FedEx decided to stop doing business with Amazon. Maybe Amazon decided to stop doing business with FedEx. But at the end of the day, you know how that came down. They couldn't agree in a negotiation on the next year's shipping rates. So what is Amazon doing? They're creating a network of franchised delivery operations. They're using their free cash flow to finance an enormous array of local delivery operators. They're giving them the financial capability to not only acquire trucks, but hire people and create terminal facilities. So Amazon is delivering to them locally what they are then delivering in that last mile to customers. They're giving people an opportunity, an entrepreneurial opportunity. And of course, there's an enormous amount of sweat equity in any entrepreneurial operation. And so there's a lot of motivation to be extremely productive. And so this is a way for Amazon to continue to eliminate or disenfranchise another middleman in this process to be able to protect their margins. It's always going to be very expensive to hand a package to a customer, because until we are living in the age of autonomous vehicles and drones, it's going to entail a human being who has to transport that product and hand it over. And so that is never going to be in the near term a robotic process. It's going to be challenging. So the economics that support it have to become more efficient. I believe free shipping is going to be a headline for maybe forever, but pricing has to adjust and logistics processes have to adjust, because free money isn't going to be free either.
That's very interesting, and we're coming to almost the end of our 1 hour conversation, and I want to thank the professor and ask this one final question before we end the discussion, which is what's the role in this play for convenience and having for proximity, where people want things instantly? What's the role of C-stores, of convenience stores? Not the large supermarkets, but the small OXXO or Dollar General that are based around the block. Because we have seen FedEx partnering with Dollar General in the US, Amazon partnering with OXXO in Mexico. How relevant is this format in the future of retail?
Well, I think there has been an enormous surge of growth in the dollar store industry in the United States. A lot of customers who traded down into the dollar stores during the 2008 recession never left the dollar stores. They were perfectly happy to continue to shopping. And these two big chains in the US have opened literally thousands of stores a year since the recession. They're doing business today because they're selling essential products, so they're allowed to be open. I think they are going to be in a Renaissance-like position coming out of the pandemic, as long as they can protect their assortments and make their establishments increasingly attractive, in addition to being tremendously convenient. So it's a decentralization, if you will, of retail, retailing at a very local level. I think customers in Manhattan, in New York City, love the opportunity to walk across the street to a local bodega who is open for business and who is financially viable enough to keep their shelves full. And their popularity, which has been constant or steady, is growing exponentially. And so, and especially if they have some connection with a a larger player like a FedEx or an Amazon who can use them as a portal, as a local portal. So I think they're going to be in great shape as long as they can remain in business and continue to service customers through the crisis.
Okay, well, Professor, thank you very much for the time and such a clear view on the future of this industry and how to navigate this crisis that has everyone on their edge, as you well said. Karen, I'll leave it to you.
To wrap it up, thank you,
Yeah.
Mark. Thank you, George. This has been a great conversation. We will post it in our website in the next few hours, so those who came in late or those who couldn't make it could definitely access it and download it. And Mark, maybe in a few, I would say, hopefully months, we can do another webinar talking about the end of fast fashion, which is one topic we were all talking about in light of climate change challenges, but that, that's over at this point, but eventually we'll come back. So thanks again, and looking forward to working with you, and hopefully when you can travel, maybe you can visit us.
I have never been to Chile. I would love to visit, and as all of us are looking forward to better days, it's been a pleasure to be able to speak, even if it's been remotely with all of you, and I wish everyone to stay safe and well.
Same to you. Stay
Likewise.
safe.
Gracias,
Thank
Karen.
you very much.
Gracias, Karen.
Gracias, Karen. Gracias, George. Thank you, Professor. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.